There's a little war that few people talk about or know about, at least in the West. But if you go to Georgia and you go to Armenia and you ask them about the war that they had a century ago, over a century, actually, I think it was just right after World War I. But if you go over there and you ask them about it, they can tell you every detail about it. They could tell you where the battlefields are. It's burned into their memory. And I guess the point I'm making is people don't forget wars. They don't, really. And they don't forget invasions. And that's why I find what Putin's done to Ukraine will not be forgotten anytime soon. That he has totally destroyed Russia's reputation, I think probably permanently. This may take a long time, if not centuries. The Ukrainians will never forget this, including Ukrainians that have not even been born yet. He has created a country that's really going to hate Russia for a very long time, and it's very sad. But we're in day 5 now, and we're just seeing images I really never thought I would see in Europe again. Just completely destroyed apartment buildings. This looks like something out of World War II. Missiles being shot into apartment buildings, just whole areas leveled. And yet the Ukrainians fight on and on. And with little help, I guess, the West is getting some of these small arms through here, but they're basically on their own. But they're fighting a very, very determined opponent. The Russians are fighting a very, very determined opponent. And I guess it's a reminder that when you invade a country, you're going to be fighting people that are going to be fighting out of their minds. And nobody knows this better than the Russians. That's, I guess, the tragic irony about this is that you're seeing, the Russians fought the Germans. And, we know, of course, about the Battle of Stalingrad, but, they just fought insanely hard for their homeland. And we're seeing that here in Ukraine. And Ukraine fought the Germans, too. That's the other ironic part about this. The word partisan, when you go over there, it has a different meaning in Ukraine, but they were the ones, the Germans, when they invaded and conquered vast parts of the Ukraine, they had to deal with those partisans. It was really in Ukraine where a lot of the problems for the German occupiers were. They had all kinds of problems with partisan attacks. So that word has a very important meaning in Ukraine. So again, we're in day 5, and the Ukrainians, against really almost impossible, almost in an impossible situation, continue to fight on and on, inflicting heavy casualties on the Russians. If you believe the numbers now, it's up to 6,000 perhaps, and thousands thousands captured. And the interviews with a lot of these Russian soldiers are shocking to me. I spent some time today watching some of them on YouTube, and just shocking seeing, first of all, the youth, how young some of these soldiers. There's one, he doesn't even look like he's 18. It's always a reminder to me that usually the people fighting these wars and making the sacrifices are a lot younger than somebody like Putin, a coward like Putin. It's easy for him to send, these troops in there, but there's a price to pay at the front line. And a lot of these soldiers thought were told they were in exercise. They're kind of repeating the same line. They thought they were in exercises. Some of them didn't even realize they were in Ukraine. They didn't even know they were there. This is just really sort of shocking deception. But, there's going to be a huge toll to pay for not just the Ukrainian people, but also the Ukrainian military, the Russian military, all these people because of one man. And that's what's sort of surprising to me, that today, we really have to sort of get rid of these absolute rulers. And that's what Putin essentially has become now. He's become sort of an absolute ruler. He has total control over that country. And that's the dangerous part about this, is he can go ahead and order the largest invasion and war in Europe, primarily since World War II. We haven't really seen anything like this. And, it'll just go on. And the problem is, he spent the last 20 years tightening the noose around Russia. So he's only, apparently he's only got a few people that actually can get close to him and talk to him. Very, very few people. And most of these are ex-KGB, ex-KGB, ex-security officials. So the chances of an overthrow of him are pretty slim, actually. I mean, you'd have to have massive protests in Russia. You'd have to see, the security. It's the FSB now. Basically, it's the KGB. They never really left. And then you also have the army. You'd have to have pretty much a full revolt for that to happen. It's not impossible. We'll see. We are seeing some things that are just, even in our time, I thought I'd never see. I mean, we see the Swiss today sanctioning Russia. I mean, they've had this neutral stance since before World War II. They've been staying out of things. Now we have Sweden. Think of that. Sweden, who also has had this, who's been neutral for decades and decades and decades, thinking about joining NATO. The same thing as Finland. And I think it's going to happen, actually. They're probably going to join because they see what's going on in Ukraine, and they want NATO to come in there and help them. And if Ukraine had been a NATO country, who knows? I'm assuming NATO would have gone in there, but the West has dealt with Putin very weakly, in a very weak manner for decades. So, buying all that natural gas, he's basically one large fuel station, right? And now they are starting to second guess that, and you're seeing all these sanctions. Now the real question is, when this gets resolved, if it gets resolved anytime soon, will they keep up the heat on Putin? Or are they just going to go back to business as usual? I don't think so, though. I think this really did sort of galvanize Europe and seems to have caught Putin off guard. I mean, two things. He galvanized Europe, and he also, the stiff resistance. And it's going to be interesting. I mean, they're rolling out the heavy weapons now. We're seeing big artillery. They're bringing up submarines. They're carpet bombing. All of these horrible things to the Ukrainian people. And we'll see, but that could become their version of Stalingrad. Isn't that strange? I mean, you go in and bomb these areas, but you also create a lot of places for snipers, and the Ukrainian militias are coming in, Ukrainian regular army units, a lot of different places to hide, and they have basically said they're willing to die to the last man. So that's a really hard type of war to fight. And, the United States found that out in Afghanistan and Iraq. When you're fighting a very determined enemy, it is difficult to defeat them, no matter what type of, technology you have. And now this could become the Russians' version of Vietnam. It certainly looks like it. And I don't think the Ukrainians are going to back down anytime soon. Let's hope eventually the Russians come to their senses and try to exit out of this gracefully if there is a way. But any event, it's very sad, the whole thing. And, I never thought I would see some of these things I'm seeing in my lifetime. Again, Switzerland, of all the places, Switzerland, which has really been so proud of their neutrality, to sit here and sanction Russia. I mean, just shocking things we're seeing. So we'll see what happens. It's very interesting. The world's an interesting place, and hopefully, the next they can get some sort of peace accord. But I tend to doubt it. I think Putin, I think the problem with this whole thing is these sanctions aren't really going to affect Putin. No, they won't affect him. And they won't affect, some of the people that are really close to him. They don't really rely on outside income. It's going to be the everyday Russians that will suffer from this. But the people that are close to Putin and himself, no, they're not going to suffer from this at all. And that's why he's probably willing to keep this going as long as he wants. Thanks as always for listening. Maybe in a week I'll do another update. Thanks a lot.